Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Can You Hear Me podcast. I'm Rob Johnson, president of Rob Johnson Communications. Eileen is not with us today, sadly, because she had some unanticipated connectivity issues. So she sends her apologies and she'll be back with us on the next episode. Well, occasionally here on the Can You Hear Me podcast, we like to shine the light on leaders to learn more about their style and their priorities and their culture. We call it the How They Do It series. And today we are thrilled to be joined by one such leader. He is Marty Ozinga, CEO of Ozinga, and now the host of the Said in Stone podcast, which they produce in their sparkling new podcast studio at Ozinga headquarters in Mokina. And for those of you that will be watching this on YouTube, you can see him from that sparkling studio. For the rest of you, that's audio only, so sorry. Marty, thanks for joining us on Can You Hear Me today? Really appreciate you joining.
Thank you, Rob. Glad to be here.
Well, it's interesting that, you're going to be probably taking notes like how, listen, we've got this great podcast studio. We know what we're doing. Let's see if Rob and the Can You Hear Me folks know what they're doing. And I hope,
Well, I don't know if we know what we're doing, but we're trying to figure it out.
but
So,
you're doing it, man. You're doing it. So Marty, Ozinga is a nearly 100-year-old company that specializes in concrete and bulk materials. And our Illinois listeners will probably remember seeing your ubiquitous red trucks on just about every construction site in the area. We know this is a family business, but could you share your background a little bit and how you knew you were destined to join the family business?
yes, I'd be happy to. So, Ozinga is a 97-year-old company. It was started by my great-grandfather, Martin Ozinga Sr., in 1928. He was a Dutch immigrant. They came from the Netherlands in 1893, actually, the year of the World's Fair in Chicago, the Columbian Exposition. And as a kid, he was a vegetable peddler, and they came to be in start the company as after he was in law enforcement in Evergreen Park for a while. In 1928, he started as a coal delivery business, and the next generation got us into concrete after World War II. And That's been the main business since then. But we've gotten into a number of other businesses as a family. But ready mix concrete since about 1950 has been sort of our trademark, as you said, red and white stripe trucks riding around town, the mixer trucks. But for about 75 years now, that's been sort of the mainstay.
So, so what was your background education wise, and did you know immediately, hey, I'm the next generation, I'm going into the business, or was that something that didn't occur to you initially? What was that process like?
Yeah, that's a great question for a lot of family businesses. So I'm fourth generation. I have five brothers and a cousin that are with me in the fourth generation. And I think for us growing up, because the company had such a great name and reputation, and we saw our dad go to work and take pride in the work, and we started working there in summers and school and whatnot. It really became a place where I think we took great pride in having the opportunity to work there. And so, I think there was always the idea that we, could work somewhere else, but we all, at one point or another, have chosen to work at the family business. And for me, when I was young, I think I wanted to play for the White Sox, and go to space and some other things. But eventually it's settled on the family business. But
And what a family business it is. So let's pivot here a little bit because I know that there's a few things that are very top of mind for you when it comes to leading a company. And you're the CEO. The buck stops with you, and you're pulled in many different directions. What would you say is the most essential part of building a positive foundation for your company or any other company?
yeah, I think at the most important thing is trying to understand the foundation of why you do what you do. For us as a family, we come from a faith tradition, a Christian tradition, that this business is part of our faith calling, that we're actually called to do this work. And so we have that common bond amongst ourselves. And so I think that's been foundational to our history and a family of, seeing us as stewards of this business, of the legacy, of the values. And then from there, understanding, why is it that we do what we do? And for us as a company, we've said we want to have a positive impact through the business have a positive impact on people's lives, and the lives of their families and the lives of the community. And because we've seen it work that way for generations, we say that that's our purpose, that we want to do it that those impacts would last for generations. Um, and having that common purpose really helps us, uh, I think, stay grounded in why we do what we do. And then from there, we can get to work on strategy and other things. But you have to have a common sort of foundation of your purpose, I believe. For us as a family, it extends into our deep roots of our faith. And, beyond that, we start to get into values and sort of how we do what we do, how we behave, and then from there you start to get the outcomes of the results kind of flow from there. So that's the way we look at things.
How important to you is building trust? And when you're building that foundation, how important is trust to building that foundation?
Yeah, I mean, I look at trust as the foundation of all relationships. For me, trust is a key thing, whether it's at home in a marriage or with your children. But trust at work is all about, you know, making sure that you have a strong foundation to be able to do things in a way that you can execute without a lot of wasted energy. And in a lot of organizations or communities, you have a lot of wasted energy, politics, and back channel conversations, and really infighting. And I'm not saying we don't have any of that at Ozinga, but we really want to work hard to have a high level of trust so that you really mitigate the wasted energy, that you can work to when you do fight, so to speak, when you do have conflict, that it's healthy and it's robust, and you really have good, healthy, robust conflict about ideas, not personal, agendas.
Well, that's a really good point. And a lot of the things you're talking about, foundation and trust and things of that nature, have positive connotations. But you did bring up just a second ago, kind of eliminating distractions and friction and things of that nature. Why is that so crucial for you, and how are you able to do it for you and everyone who works with you at Ozinga when it comes to eliminating those things that are potentially wasted energy?
Well, I would first say that even though we've been at it for 97 years, that we're still a work in progress. You have to kind of come to the table with acknowledging that it's fragile and that at any time it could get eroded. And so you really have to put in the work of and the commitment, and remind yourself and refresh yourself about why it's so important. With that being said, I think particularly when you look at the odds of family business survival, that you get to fourth or fifth generation and you start to get to really very low single digit numbers, or even less than 1% survival rate, really, of all businesses, up to 100 years old. But family businesses in particular, there's just a lot of dynamics that come into play, in families, but then you have family business. And so, it's that much more important, I think, in any business, but also in our case, in a family business, that we continue to work on, having a strong foundation of trust, so that, again, we don't get distracted from the mission and the purpose of why we're doing what we're doing.
You really bring up an interesting point, because I see it, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners do as well, that you'll see a founder, you'll see somebody who, built a business from, the ground up, and not all the time, but many times the next generation or the generation after that aren't that interested in running it. And so that speaks to your low percentage of, those older businesses that are still successful. What was done in your family? I know you have the values, I know you have the trust, and I know you said you saw your dad going to work and he was proud of it and that sort of thing, but it has to be more than that. What was instilled in all of you to make you say we want in on that? And then I would say, perhaps arguably, you're taking it to another level, and that would make your dad and your grandpa and your great grandpa, very proud. How did that work, where it was something that was like, hey, we got to, this next generation, we got to get in on this?
Yeah, I think you mentioned a lot of the things, but one of the thing that's been consistent in the generations for us is um, the founder or the next generation, at some point when they determined that the next generation was ready, they got out of the way.
Yeah.
And that's been a tremendous blessing for our business in that um, every generation has sort of respected the ability and ambition of young people and the upcoming generation to say, okay, you know, these guys these guys are ready, and because of that, I'm going to get out of their way. And I think we if we look at our story, every generation did that at a pretty young age for the next generation. And so that's going to be our challenge as the company has grown, is to figure out, when the next generation is ready. And that I think there's a reason that's attractive, is because you know you you want to have autonomy. You want to have pride of ownership, and you want to know that, like, you got your shot and you're not just in someone else's shadow, kind of thing. And a lot of times I think people get stuck on, like, just sort of, you know under the shadow of, the previous person or whatever. um and some people make that work, working together with their dad or their parent, and other people have a really hard time with it. And so if you think about age, some people live to 90, and their 70-year-old son is waiting, to take their
Waiting to do it.
turn.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean, that can work, but it often does not.
So the way you talk about all of this, it sounds so natural for you and your family to build the culture in this fashion. But the truth is, and we talked about it when we were having our planning meeting, many leaders don't subscribe to this. This isn't natural for them. It's very natural for you all. So even though it is, you still have to spend time and energy on alignment and trust. So why do you do it? Why do you spend so much time? Because you don't have to. A lot of places don't do it. Why is it so vital for Ozinga?
Well, probably because we learn things the hard way. I mean, when we don't, get back to the knitting and the basics of those things, um, you have a lot of pain. you know,
Yeah, that's true.
you see dysfunction, and you and it starts to be very distracting, as I said earlier. And we've realized that, you know, you can either try to, keep putting band-aids on dysfunction, or you can get to the root of things. And I think um, uh, there's a Bible verse that says something to the effect of, love covers a multitude of sins. And if there's we're all going to mess up on a regular basis, and you can either get really petty about other people's mess ups, or you can have grace and just sort of like water off a duck's back kind of thing and just move on. And that pettiness can be a real distraction in any kind of community. And if you find yourself in that situation, um, it's very difficult just to serve customers and get the job done when you're dealing with a lot of infighting, so to speak. And as I said, I've challenged. I do a lot of onboarding with new employees, and outside looking in, we look like the shiny, you know, bright example. We're 97 years of track record, and we have a lot to be proud of. But you get under the hood here, and you'll see a lot of uh, work, room for improvement, and that's part of, I think, what makes it work, is coming to the table, acknowledging that we're all kind of uh, a project in under construction individually. And if you can kind of sort of have that level of vulnerability, I think that does start to help foster trust, because we're all kind of a hot mess, and we got to be sort of um, willing to admit that we all have areas of improvement. And I think from there you can start to actually get to work on how we can help each other.
I really love the fact that you talked about the vulnerability, because I talk about that a lot with clients. It has to be authentic, first of all. You can't be like, I'm going to be vulnerable if you're not. So it has to be authentic, but it also requires a bit of self-awareness. And that's one of my key messages to everybody who's in a leadership position is, if you have self-awareness, all these other things are going to take care of themselves because you're going to be paying attention to it and you're going to understand that things can be better. So when you talk about that vulnerability, you're exhibiting self-awareness. How important do you think it is to be a leader sitting where you sit who is self-aware and who knows, hey, we've got 97 years. We got a lot to celebrate, but we got a long way to go. You can't do that if you think that you're always right and you bark out orders and it's not a two-way street, in terms of the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's significant. I think, you have to appreciate that we, we all need help. We all have uh, gifts and talents and abilities, but we also all have limitations. And when you surround yourself with, a talented team, my dad used to say, he would try to surround himself with people smarter than him. And he wasn't just talking about like IQ per se, or people who got better grades. But it was people who had different gifts than he did. And if you have that belief that you are surrounded with people who have complementary or different gifts than you do, well, then you should say, hey, I need your help. And that's vulnerability right there. It's just to say, hey, I need help here. I can't do this myself. I think some people, when they're running a small business or any business or a project, it's like they feel like, you know, as the leader, you have to have all the answers. What do you mean you don't have all the answers? And it's like, no, that's why I have you here, because I need help and I don't have the answers.
And that's listening, right? I mean, some people like to be like, think of themselves as like a me brand CEO, like I have all the answers and I know all the answers. And if you're doing your job because you're, at the top of the ladder, the rung, there's no way you can have the answers. You do have to listen to what the people that are out there on the front lines, people that are out there meeting with customers, clients, whatever the case may be, they're the ones that should be providing you the answers. True?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, and I think you get answers by asking good questions. Um, and I think I know I need to do better at this all the time, not just at work, but at home, but like just being a good listener, asking good questions, and then, the question after the question, even, I think a lot of that is, just being a curious person and asking good questions and really trying to get to the heart of like what someone's trying to communicate, what they're saying. And I think also like being comfortable in your own skin, like, because otherwise you can get defensive pretty quickly and not really hear what the intent of what someone's trying to say. Sometimes people can be fighting for the relationship. It comes across as some kind of attack. You could get defensive and then attack them back, or you could just say, "Hey, can you tell me more about that? Why you feel that way?" Or, and again, I'm learning these things myself. I mean, we're all trying to figure this stuff out, and I think we as communities, as a society, we could all do a better job of being better listeners. So.
Absolutely. I know I've been working very hard on it and I've been made aware of it. And you and I both love to talk, but I've really tried to listen to other people to really send them down that road where I can learn more about them. And the truth is, when you get people to talk more, they're talking about their favorite subject, themselves. So
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
it's kind of natural. So clearly you all have been leaning on trust, collaboration, to build the Ozinga culture. But for a brand as well known as yours, I have been personally impressed at how committed you are to continuing that brand building. In fact, we mentioned earlier in the podcast that Set in Stone, your podcast, is produced from the headquarters in the state of the art studio in Mokina. And I will also say, in full disclosure, I've had the opportunity to come down there on several occasions and work with you and work with some other folks when it comes to the podcast producing. But it is an absolute, shiny toy. It is. I mean, it's got to be the envy of anybody who can see the podcast studio. It's a tremendous investment you're making. That's what I'm getting to. Why did you decide to make that kind of investment? And why do you believe podcasts are one of the tools in building your overall brand as you move forward here?
Well, first of all, I can't take credit for the investment. One of my brothers, Justin, he decided to do this, and I wasn't aware of even how much money they were spending. But in the end, it really is in alignment with what we're about, from the standpoint of, I didn't share this before. maybe it's written somewhere, but I went to Northwestern for a master's in communication. A lot of business people go for a master's in business. I decided to go for a master's in communication just because I felt like communication is, we can never do enough communicating. At least that was one of the things I learned in the program is we just assume too much about the people that are under our, in our lives, what that people aren't mind readers and we assume they are. And so sometimes we get sick of hearing ourselves say the same thing over and over and over again, whether that's a story or where we're going. But for us, having the podcast, it's just another tool in the toolbox to communicate, with our stakeholders, our coworkers, our customers, people in the community. And to me, people can see the red and white stripe trucks riding around, but behind the company and behind the equipment is human lives, people. And in a lot of respects, when we communicate, we're trying to sort of humanize the corporation, if you will, by just getting people to understand, what makes us tick, what we're interested in, what we care about. And, hopefully that resonates with people and they want to join us in doing good work.
I think your episodes so far have been fantastic, and you've had some very interesting guests on. You're not somebody that's done a lot of podcasts, but you're the one that it was the you're the pioneer there at Ozinga, right? What have you learned in those interactions with your guests, and just this whole process of an unfiltered discussion, the one we're having right here? We have guardrails up a little bit just to send us down the tracks the right way, but most of this is just, hey, this question popped into my head, and I'm genuinely interested in what you have to say. What do you think you've learned as a podcast host now that that's one of your major brand building initiatives, using the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I've always enjoyed a one-on-one conversation, and so in many respects, I find it, a little bit of a disservice that one-on-one conversations are, so private. Obviously conversations need to be private at times, but like it's really a privilege in some respects that other people are willing to take those one-on-one conversations public, because I just think there's so many great stories out there, and we get to hear those because of what we do. And for us, again, I think it's just a really valuable opportunity to build relationships with the guest, and have a very sort of long form, you know, in-depth conversation that we may not have otherwise, may or may not. And then just to share that, and hopefully, again, our purpose is to have a positive impact on people, um, somehow or another, that changes the trajectory of people's lives by hearing something, through the mediums that are now available to us, podcast being one of them, and all the technology we have to broadcast these messages. I mean, I know you've spent time in TV and radio. Uh, we didn't, having a station or a TV channel, that was, never really, I don't know how much that would have cost, but this is a
The
lower
podcast
barrier to,
studio is way cheaper.
yeah, it's a much lower barrier to entry to communicate to a very broad audience potentially, and that's exciting. Innovation in technology is allowing us to communicate with people all over the world, that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do, and I think that's just one of uh, the joys and the benefits of utilizing technology to continue to live into our purpose and to communicate with people.
Well, I'll just say this again. I'm so impressed with that studio. I'm so impressed with the investment you've made as a company, and some really talented people that are behind the scenes helping you execute all of that. You have a great team, and it's
Yeah,
exciting for me as yeah,
it's the team that, sort of makes us all look good. The
yeah.
production people behind the scenes. So much in life is like that. Where the people that you surround yourself with and are behind the scenes either make or break you. And in our case, they're making us, like you said, they're making us look good here. So
Really impressive. And as a communicator, I'm just really happy that you see the value, because some of my other clients too are like, hey, we need help with brand building, and one of the tenants is we need, we got to have a podcast.
Mm.
Now, the clients I'm working with aren't building their own studios like you have. They're doing them remotely, but people see the value in having that subject matter expertise, having that ability to communicate unfiltered, where you don't have your message being synthesized in different ways. It's your message. And I think that's very powerful for companies that are trying to remind people of what they have to offer, like yours.
Yeah, thank you. And
Well,
thanks for your guidance on it too. It's been a
oh,
real help.
it's always a pleasure to meet with your folks, because I mean, listen, people who are listening to this are saying, "Man, he sounds like a really good guy," and you are. But it's also the people that every person I've worked with there, they also have the same kind of sensibility, and that's because you've instilled that in them. You're hiring people that you know are aligned with that kind of philosophy, and so every time I walk in there, it's a joy. So that's a complete credit to you and everybody that runs Ozinga.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So before we wrap up here, Marty, if people, the listeners, once this is over, they're like, what did I learn today? What is the one thing you want to leave our listeners with today? You want them to take home with them?
I think with respect to um, how we communicate, um, I think about it like to be you mentioned the word authentic. I think it's so important to just be comfortable in your own skin, no matter what setting you're in. Obviously, you have to be mindful of, your audience and be strategic. But I do think, if we want to build trust with people, um, we have to be authentic and just find ways to communicate our heartbeat um, as as individuals and people in community. And I just think there's so many great opportunities in community um, to impact our world, impact people's lives, and but it has a lot of these ideas, if they just stay in our minds and they don't go to our mouths and then like to some kind of medium that helps advance it,
Mhm.
it's a disservice to the God-given thoughts and dreams and abilities that we have if they just stay up here and they don't get like out with this tongue of ours into the ether. They're not, those things aren't going to go anywhere. So let's have some courage, uh we're all made with unique gifts, talents, and abilities, and also dreams, unique dreams. And so if we can find ways to have courage enough to have good conversations and to share them, I think we can impact the world. And I think that's an exciting thing to think about.
That's really exciting. That's very inspirational, and that's a great thing to. There's the mic drop from Marty Ozinga. Thanks for joining us on our "How They Do It" series. This was absolutely enlightening, and I just love your leadership style and your sensibility, and the fact that you think about the little things and have that self-awareness. Bravo.
Well, thank you, Rob. I appreciate you having me.
Well, it's been our pleasure. So that's going to do it for another edition of Can You Hear Me? I'm Rob Johnson. If you'd like to comment on the podcast or suggest a topic, please contact us at our Can You Hear Me podcast page on LinkedIn, or subscribe to our newsletter, which is on that same page. Eileen says hello to everyone. She will be back next episode. And if you like what you heard, please consider giving Can You Hear Me a positive review wherever you get your podcasts, such as Apple or Spotify. It helps other listeners find the podcast. Thanks for listening.